So yeah, I work at a company named Frog. We're a global product design company. We make products, consumer products, we help design them for our clients. And we sort of make some of the things that I think Scott was alluding to in his talk that you might see as competition. But not all of them are. You know? I hope to show you give you a little peek into how designers think and work today through means of a project example and a thinking tool that you can actually take away with you after our talks are done today. So almost 2 summers ago, a small group of us in our studio here in Austin started to think about ourselves getting older, our parents getting older. Many of us were faced with some unique circumstances. And we wanted to understand the role that design could play in this process of aging, getting a little bit older, providing care. And if you're a designer, you have to sort of have a curious nature. You also have to be willing to ask some rather obvious questions in order to get at some meaningful insight and some meaningful answers. And so we did. The way that we often do that is to look into people's lives as deeply as we can. And one of our methods that we use is that we borrow from the social sciences. It's called ethnographic research. And basically it means trying to walk a mile in somebody's shoes, the person's shoes that you're trying to design for. So this is a photo from one of those ethnographic research interviews. We went into the homes of about 10 or 11 folks that were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s to get a sense of kind of how they live. And this is one of our participants, Sandra, and she's showing us a collection of her snow babies that she's been collecting for well over 20, 25 years. She has hundreds of these. They're very, very important to her. It's a small, simple object. They're really not that expensive. I think you can get them on QVC. That's where she gets a lot of hers. That's her granddaughter, inscribed on the label there. But she was showing this to us because this is an object that she looks at every day, and it means a lot to her. It makes her feel like herself. During our tours, we also saw things like this. We pretty much all have one of these, I bet. But especially folks that are a little bit older, they have them as well. And they often look like this. They sort of follow this model of the front of the refrigerator is a bit of a photographic display, a photo album of their immediate and extended family. And the side of the refrigerator is a schedule, keeping track of all different kinds of schedules. Theirs, their grandkids. It's filled with toys, lots of knickknacks, things to do when the grandkids come over, or their own sons and daughters. But it becomes a very meaningful totem in the house. Important if you're a designer to pay attention to these things because there's opportunities that reside within that. Some other things that we learned when we did this research was about the kinds of activities that people do, how they stay fit and healthy. That doesn't always mean going to a gym or going for a run or riding a bike, though those are all really good things. Sometimes, for a lot of folks, it means just doing really simple things. This is Indra. She has a garden, a very small garden in her backyard. And every day, she goes out there and she tends to it, harvests the fruits and the vegetables, brings them inside, cooks meals for her family, her husband, and also takes them to her church that she's a part of. And it makes her feel great. It also keeps her active because she's bending over, she's picking things up, she's walking around and keeping it moving. I want to double click on a couple of stories. One about one of the seniors that we visited with named Blanche, and another about a caregiver that we spent time with as well. So this is Blanche. About 6 or 7 years ago, she lost her husband of 50 years. And since then, she hasn't really stopped. It hasn't slowed her down at all. She's lucky. She really is one of the lucky ones. She's been able to stay incredibly active. She lives in the same house that she built with her husband. It's huge, and it's filled with stuffed animals, books, memorabilia, all kinds of things. She's incredibly active. She's a poet. She's a writer. She teaches Sunday school. She has 2 or 3 social activities that she's doing every week, and this keeps her going. These are really, really important things to her. However, Blanche doesn't sleep very well at night. She sleeps probably about 3 or 4 hours because of the pains that she experiences in her hips. And so while we were doing our research and walking around the house, we noticed that she had 5, 6 chairs that all had these interesting bundles of pillows and blankets piled up on top of the chairs. And as it turns out, so she only sleeps a few hours at night, but she'll take cat naps during the day. Those cat naps help her catch up on her sleep. And she has these chairs and pillows and blankets arranged just so that it really provides her with the kind of comfort she needs. It can get her in the right position. Very important thing to notice, to think about the context of design. Talk to you about Virginia. She's a caregiver. She was a caregiver to her mom, who died a few years ago due to complications from Alzheimer's. But Virginia is the oldest of 5 siblings, and she assumed the care for her mom. That was a very challenging thing for reasons that you can imagine as related to Alzheimer's, but also she found it very difficult to negotiate with her siblings about how best to go about providing this care to her mom, who was, by and large, unreasonable, very challenging every day, making requests that the family didn't really want to fulfill. And I'll give you an example of one of those. When Virginia's mom reached a point where she could not live at home and they had to move her into some assisted living homes, she gained this reputation as being a little bit forgetful and also being something of a thief. Not uncommon for folks that are suffering from some of these conditions. She also began to make requests for objects that she wanted from her home to be brought into the homes that she was living in. Remember, people like these little things. They mean a lot to them. The family was against this. She wanted wedding albums, she wanted wedding rings, she wanted some old dinnerware that meant a lot to her, and she wanted them to bring it to her, but they were afraid if we bring this to her, she's just going to lose it, right? And this stuff you can't replace. So Virginia decided to make a copy of everything. Made Xerox copies of the wedding album, even had her wedding rings replicated. Went to Goodwill, bought some old Fiesta ware, gave it to her, brought her in, made her day. She stopped asking for these things so much, made it a little bit easier on Virginia, improved the relationship that Virginia had with her brothers and her sisters. So, simple, small little move that was very clever and that helped Virginia do her job a little bit easier. When we do this kind of research, it really builds a good foundation for design. One of the important things that we try to pull out of it are what are needs that people have. These are 4 what we called core needs that came out of the research that I just described. And the first one is about identity, helping me as an elder stay me as long as I possibly can, helping me stay and feel like I am myself and that I'm able to do the kinds of things that I like to do, stick to a routine, go out and do some gardening, or if part of my routine includes going to church or being a part of a club of some kind, being a part of the community that's recognizable, that social aspect is also incredibly important. So these 4 core needs sort of built part of a foundation for us to design from. Another model that came out of the work and that contributed to the design foundation is something that we call the emotional journey map, which is a picture that essentially it maps some very predictable stages that we saw and heard about from these folks that we talked to as things go from being normal to maybe being a little bit off to moving into a state of kind of what we called a new normal. Things are different now. So drawing upon Virginia's mom's story a little bit, what happened with her was that after her husband died, Virginia and her family started to notice that her mom was exhibiting some signs of forgetfulness and a little bit of disorientation, cause for concern. Wasn't long after that she had a fall. She hurt her hip quite bad. She was in the hospital for a little bit. She came back. But then after that, things were not the same. This is a pattern that we saw and we heard a lot from the folks that we talked to and that we visited with in their homes. So something's off, something happens, you move into a state of a new normal, and you have to deal with it as both an elder and a caregiver. Not an easy task. But these things like needs and models can provide really, really useful foundations for thinking about how do we design for those predictable scenarios that we know are coming, right? So I want to share with you 3 ideas that came out of this research. These are things that we are still in the process of developing, kind of prototyping them right now. One is called Q, and this is kind of a, if you will, maybe an ethical application or an ethical reason for being for Google Glass. But this is a set of glasses that you can put on that has an application to it that can read some of the structure of a face or an object and provide some sort of memory or some kind of image or a word to help jog the memory of somebody suffering from memory loss or disorientation. Another concept that came out of the research is a blanket that we call Snooze. And it's a biometric blanket. It can read vitals while an individual sleeps, but it's also connected to a communications network so that, say, the caregiver or the family or even the doctor's staff can pay attention to the kinds of vitals and their health condition as they sleep or as they move through the day without always having to go into the doctor. It also goes a little bit beyond just the simple phone call, which is very important from a son or a daughter, but it gives that son or a daughter a deeper look into how mom or dad is doing. Another idea is something called Portal. You can imagine something like this blanket, this biometric blanket, feeding into this concept right here, which is a UI, user interface, that lays over any common mirror in the house by means of a projection display. And it can project some of the vitals that the biometric blanket is actually collecting. And it can give that individual some advice about how to change their nutrition, maybe some new exercises that they could do to alleviate some of the patterns that the blanket picks up while they're sleeping, but generally lead to a better landscape of health just by looking into the mirror, right? Another thing that came out of our research, and I'm going to ask Meg to hand me that, thank you very much, is a design thinking tool. So while we went ahead and created a bunch of concepts because that's our want and we have those skills, we also thought that it was important to create some kind of a tool that virtually anyone, including you, could use to think through some of these scenarios and use them for design. Think of new ideas to provide services in your job or even come up with new products and services if you're an entrepreneur. And it's something that we call the Innovation Action Map. And basically what it is a simple map, and we have a bunch of these outside in the aisle. You can pick them up afterwards. But on one side, it gives you a little bit of a background about the project itself. It reintroduces you to this emotional journey map. And on the other, it provides you with a step-by-step process for thinking through how to design new ideas for providing better care. So the idea is to get to sort of the design of an opportunity that you can describe by drawing from some of the definitions of the needs, those 4 core needs, and thinking about how it applies to different types of health professionals, caregivers, or even seniors, and how to design for different stages in the actual emotional journey map. So that's our action map, and I would encourage you to pick one up. And yeah, that's a little bit about how we think about using design to make life a little bit easier for those folks who are getting a little bit older and those of us responsible for taking care of them. Thanks very much.